Funerals, shrouded bodies, prayers amid ruins, debris just about everywhere. This is Gaza today. As Israel pounds the besieged Strip with relentless strikes, on Tuesday, casualties were rushed to the Al-Shifa hospital after an Israeli airstrike on Gaza City killed and injured many.
Around 11:30 p.m. last night, we were surprised by a very loud explosion that damaged many buildings, including our home. We rushed out. There were injuries inside the house caused by falling debris from the walls and doors, which landed on the children. Then we heard screaming from our neighbors, so we ran over and found bodies torn apart, including an infant baby girl no older than 4 months.
My children are trembling with fear because their mother became a martyr. I'm still in shock and I can't believe that they are gone.
But as Palestinians die, Trump and Netanyahu sat down in Washington, indulging in self-congratulatory talk in a way and dreaming up a Riviera in Gaza. The two met for several hours while Israeli officials continued indirect talks with Hamas, hoping for a US-brokered ceasefire and hostage deal. This being Netanyahu's third visit to the White House since Trump returned to power in January. That's more than any other foreign leader, by the way. The meeting was marked by celebrations of US airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites. And Netanyahu took the moment to nominate Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well deserved, and you should get it.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know. Wow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful. Thank you very much, Bibi.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. It's a great honor.
Netanyahu will stay in Washington through Thursday, with meetings planned with Vice President J.D. Vance, the House Speaker Mike Johnson, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. In fact, Trump is pushing hard for a ceasefire and hostage release deal with negotiations underway in Qatar. But his vision for Gaza goes far beyond a short-term ceasefire. Remember, back in January, during Netanyahu's visit to the United States, Trump floated a rather shocking proposal, permanently relocating 2 million Palestinians to neighbouring countries, allowing the US to take over Gaza and develop it into the Riviera of the Middle East. And he later walked back on the comment, but the idea was already made public. Arab countries reacted sharply and came up with a counter plan, one that insists that the population remain in Gaza, rebuild the territory, and form a future Palestinian state, one without Hamas in power. But what about Netanyahu? Well, he loves Donald Trump's idea. And when asked about Trump's vision to relocate Palestinians and turn Gaza into a luxury waterfront development, Netanyahu called it a brilliant vision. And on Monday, before his private dinner with Donald Trump, Netanyahu backed the plan, telling the media, I'm quoting here, it's called free choice. If people want to stay, they can stay. But if they want to leave, they should be able to leave, quote unquote. Not just that, he added that Israel is working very closely with the US to identify countries willing to take displaced Palestinians and that the discussions were already getting close to fruition. Donald Trump, seated across from Netanyahu, simply said, and I'm quoting, something good will happen. Netanyahu's comments, meanwhile, marking his most explicit endorsement yet, backing a plan that could empty Gaza of its people and turn it into a playground in a way for the rich. The proposal has already sparked furious backlash from human rights groups, Arab leaders, as well as US allies, who called it ethnic cleansing under the guise of development. And the White House attempted damage control, walking back on elements of Trump's language. But Netanyahu's support, combined with his rejection of a Palestinian state, showing exactly what kind of peace he and Trump might be envisioning, one where Palestinians are displaced or resettled abroad, perhaps. And it's a stark break from decades of US policy, which has long insisted on a two-state solution and an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. But Netanyahu says any ceasefire deal with Hamas should not include the recognition of Palestinian statehood. Negotiators are scheduled to meet in Doha later this week. Trump believes a deal could be struck during the coming week, but Netanyahu's endorsement of mass relocation could deepen mistrust among Palestinian negotiators and also derail the progress. The war in Gaza is now in its 21st month. Since it started in 2023, Israel's military campaign has killed more than 57,000 Palestinians, displaced over 80% of the population, pushed 500,000 to the brink of famine. And there's also that question that's been doing the rounds. What made the floods there in Texas so deadly after all? What was the point of origin? How potent were they? Most importantly, were they preventable? To begin with, these are no ordinary floods, by the way. Flash floods taking the danger levels many notches higher. Just for context here, flash flooding happens when rain falls fast in a short period of time. So fast that the underlying ground fails to cope with this or drain it away fast enough. But what are the signs? Roads turn into rivers, buildings flooded just about entirely, cars, even people getting swept away. The downpour right at the head of the river water, causing it to swell up within minutes and start flowing at a fast pace. The entire event happens so fast that it usually leaves with less scope for advanced warning.
Flash flooding can happen very quickly. Many times survivors talk about how quickly the water rose. And we see from the observations along the Guadalupe River that this river, which is typically moving very slowly and might only be 3 feet in its water level at a particular location, rose quickly within an hour to a raging torrent of 30 feet of water that was 30 feet high. And that just well outside of its typical banks. That shows how quickly a life-threatening situation like this can escalate, and why it's so important to take immediate action when flash flood warnings are issued.
In Texas specifically, part of the cause behind the flash flooding being attributed to record rainfall in a particularly vulnerable area of the state, especially the Texas Hill Country, also known as the Flash Flood Alley. Thin soil, steep cliffs, narrow creeks, making it especially vulnerable to sudden intense flooding. What's more, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico rises over the cliffs and hills, which then cools and condenses into heavy rainfall. But then again, what causes these severe floods? A combination of atmospheric conditions that lead to heavy rain or the rapid melting of snow and ice. The geography of an area also making an area more likely to flood, especially if they are located near narrow and steep rivers and city areas. Are there any ways to stay safe from flash floods? Most definitely. Like early planning and evacuation, going to the rooftop of the building if possible, avoiding attic, and strategies to prevent drowning can be key to help keep yourself safe. Remember, when it comes to natural disasters, preparedness can go a long way in ensuring that major tragedies are averted. The floods in Texas have wreaked havoc, leaving behind a trail of destruction. With the death toll now crossing 100 and dozens missing, the tragedy has triggered several crucial questions as well over alertness and early disaster warning systems. Texas continues to brace for more rain in the next few days, and across America, people are walking in vigils and mourning the many lives lost.
Yeah, I was also pretty shocked on the gravity of the situation and how big it was, and I wouldn't necessarily expect that our rivers would rise so quickly. And I am concerned about the infrastructure and the need for good infrastructure to be there so that this doesn't happen. And hopefully there's preventative efforts happening in similar areas to make sure nothing to this degree happens.
The White House also calling the floods a national tragedy.
The White House is currently arranging those travel plans. We hope that it will be later this week, likely on Friday, but of course we want to do it at the most appropriate time on the ground for state and local officials. We don't want to interrupt the recovery efforts, but we're planning tentatively for a Friday trip, and when that becomes final, we'll let all of you know, as we always do.
Questions have been raised over whether there were failures of the existing systems in place, such as were there delays in evacuation of Camp Mystic, where 700 girls were camping on a known floodplain on the river there. What accounts for this? Most importantly, was America even prepared for a disaster like this? As per experts, behind all of this could be Trump's ruthless federal cuts that in a way dismantled crucial agencies helping states prepare and respond to extreme weather events and climate hazards. Concerns are mounting that cuts instigated by Trump and his former aide Elon Musk at the National Weather Service and the Federal Emergency Management Agency may have affected forecasting and contributed to the death toll as well. And this includes a proposed 25% cut to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's current annual budget of $6.1 billion, an agency which oversees the NWS, and not just budget cuts, rampant layoffs and struggles to refill key positions have in a way put several critical federal agencies under serious scrutiny. And according to the National Weather Service, about 200 people at the organization took voluntary redundancy, 300 opted for early retirement, and a further 100 were ultimately fired from the service, leading the NWS to lose 600 of its over 4,000 staff. What this resulted in is a huge staffing crisis, with several offices across the country operating without the required hands. However, this is not the first time that Trump's proposed cuts have been making news in the context of disaster response. Last year, on his campaign trail, Trump faced the challenge of weathering yet another storm, Hurricane Helen, which battered parts of North Carolina and Georgia. In response, Trump slammed the Biden administration's federal government for what he described as failures of its response and recovery operation. However, this time around, the onus lying on the Trump administration directly to do some answering for the losses and the widespread death and devastation that the floods have led to, especially as Democrats are reportedly seeking to cash in on this and turn it into a political attack as well. There are crucial questions at this point. Moving on for now, at the 17th BRICS Summit, the Indian Prime Minister sent out a firm, crucial and timely message urging fellow member nations to unite in safeguarding the supply chains for critical minerals and ensure no country uses these resources as a weapon. According to the International Energy Agency, by the way, China currently leads the world in rare earth production, controlling more than 60% of mining and over 90% of refining. But without naming any country, the Indian Prime Minister said, I'm quoting here, "We need to work together to make supply chains for critical minerals and technology secure and reliable. It's important to ensure that no country uses these resources for its own selfish gain or as a weapon against others." Prime Minister Modi's statement coming at a time when there is growing concern globally over the strategic control of minerals like lithium, nickel, rare earth elements, as well materials essential to weapons, electric vehicles, renewable energy, advanced electronics, among others. And the underlying warning by the Indian Prime Minister was also clear, that without collective action, these resources could become major tools for geopolitical leverage. And while the Indian Prime Minister did not call out China directly, the subtext was clear. In recent months, Beijing has tightened export controls on rare earth elements and the magnets produced from them, the consequences of which have been swiftly seen. Automakers in India and Japan reduced output, while the US, facing pressure from its manufacturing sector, softened its tariffs against Chinese goods. Minerals like lithium, nickel, rare earths have increasingly become strategic assets, yet despite their importance, global supplies remain rather precarious. Over a decade ago, Western nations faced a similar rare earth crisis in a way. Still, little has been done since. Many Western countries drafted critical mineral strategies but failed to fund or implement them. And today, the result is pretty clear. Fragile supply chains and insufficient reserves. Analysts warn that ending China's dominance in rare earths could take as long as 10 to 20 years and require trillions in capital. And in light of this, Prime Minister Modi's statements underscoring the need for collective global action and preventing any one country from holding the world hostage in a way over these materials, especially those that propel progress. Shifting focus for now, there is a new flashpoint in the Red Sea. Today, Germany summoned China's ambassador, accusing Beijing's military of targeting a German surveillance plane with a laser. Germany says its multi-sensor Flying Eye aircraft was on a routine EU mission over the Red Sea when it was suddenly hit by a laser fired from a Chinese warship. This aircraft, piloted by civilians with German military personnel on board, it conducts wide-range surveillance to keep vital sea lanes safe from attacks. This laser incident forced the plane to abort its mission and return to the base in Djibouti. Fortunately, no one was hurt. This is not the first time China has been accused of such tactics, by the way. In the year 2018, US pilots suffered minor eye injuries reportedly after Chinese lasers targeted their aircraft near Djibouti. Then in 2020, a Chinese warship allegedly fired a laser at a US patrol plane just west of Guam. Beijing denied both incidents. But why would a Chinese warship even use a laser? That's what the allegation is. These lasers can temporarily blind pilots, damage sensors, or disrupt surveillance systems without firing a single bullet. It's basically a way to send a hostile message while technically avoiding direct military engagement. What exactly is a laser? Laser stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. In simple terms, it's a focused beam of light that can carry immense energy. Military-grade lasers can dazzle or damage optical sensors, blind pilots, and in some cases, destroy drones or missiles. But the bigger question here is, why is China allegedly using laser weapons on German aircraft? They're not at war. While the China-US rivalry is well known, this would be the first reported incident, if it's happened, of China using laser at a European NATO member. And why would China risk diplomatic fallout over such actions if that's happened? Germany calls this behavior completely unacceptable, and for Europe, it may raise fresh concerns over China's growing military footprint, not just in Asia, but along critical trade routes connecting Africa, Europe, and West Asia. The Red Sea is already on edge, with Yemeni Houthis targeting commercial vessels in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, and Israel's multi-front war with Iran and its proxy groups. The EU's mission has been named after the ancient Greek word for shields, by the way. It's in place to protect shipping from attacks, basically, and now with China allegedly targeting European aircraft, tensions in these waters could only rise from here onwards.